the monarchy provides, with the Constitution, a degree of long-term stability that is actually quite hard to come by any other way.
What began as a peaceful royal family picnic at Balmoral Castle turned deeply heartbreaking when Princess Anne, visibly shaken and in tears, protected 9-year-old Charlotte from Queen Camilla. It was meant to be nothing more than a quiet afternoon at Balmoral Castle, a break from the world's endless scrutiny on the royal family. On the vast green grounds of Balmoral Castle, the royal family had gathered not for a public appearance or official engagement, but for something refreshingly simple, a family time. That day, no uniforms, no stiff protocol, just blankets laid across the soft grass and baskets filled with pastries, sandwiches, and homemade treats. Balmoral Castle has long held a special place in the royal tradition. Located in the Scottish Highlands, it offers something no other palace could replicate, which is peace. Though Queen Camilla wore no crown that afternoon, her presence carried a weight of its own, a quiet authority that commanded attention even in such a relaxed setting. Everyone sensed it, including Princess Anne, yet no one was prepared for what was about to unfold. As the afternoon wore on, what happened next changed everything. What began as a day of joy would end in sorrow, and at the center of it all stood a child, a queen, and a woman who had finally had enough. The moment Queen Camilla stepped into the green field with a slow, confident grace, the air shifted. She wore a pale silk blouse with a soft collar, tailored trousers, and her signature pearls. At first, the conversations just softened a bit. People smiled a little less freely. The kids who had been running and playing paused and looked over. Even though they were too young to really get what was happening, they could tell something was different. Kate was the first to stand and greet Camilla. Her smile was steady, polite, but you could see she was a little on edge. William moved closer too, the diplomat in him ready to keep things smooth. He offered Camilla a glass of Pimm's like it was no big deal, but it was one of those little moments that said, "We are still keeping it civil." Charlotte noticed it all. She was sitting nearby, watching quietly. She did not know exactly what was going on, but she felt it, the way her mom straightened up, the way William's face tightened just a little bit. Camilla smiled warmly, but her eyes told a different story. When she got to Kate, she said softly, "It is such a lovely day for a picnic. The gardens look really beautiful this year." It sounded casual, but there was something in her tone that made it clear she was setting the rules of the room without even trying. Kate smiled back, but you could tell she felt the weight behind those words. "Thank you, Camilla. The weather has been on our side." She motioned toward the kids, playing. "They are having a great time." Camilla's gaze followed Kate's hand and landed on Princess Charlotte. The young princess was seated near them, surrounded by her brothers, Prince George and Prince Louis. At that moment, Charlotte was not a princess or the future of the monarchy. She was just a little girl in socks and a cardigan enjoying the picnic. She was happy and safe until one comment changed everything. She had been laughing when she noticed Camilla's gaze, and the laughter froze briefly on her face. Not out of fear, but of something else. Maybe instinct, perhaps. "I see Charlotte is quite comfortable," Camilla said smoothly, her tone light on the surface but laced with an unmistakable undertone. "She will need to be, with what's ahead of her." The words drifted through the garden air like smoke, soft but suffocating. Charlotte, seated on a blanket near a tray of scones and jam, paused mid-laugh. She looked up, her fingers still dusted with crumbs and her skirt bunched around her knees. Her brow furrowed faintly as her name settled over the group like a shadow. "What's ahead of me?" she thought, her young mind turning the words over. She didn't fully understand them, but she felt their weight. It wasn't the words themselves that unsettled her. It was the way they were spoken, measured, as though she were being examined and assessed against an invisible standard she hadn't known existed. Across the lawn, Kate's smile faltered, just slightly. She caught herself quickly, smoothing it back into place, but not before the flicker of unease had passed through her eyes. She looked toward Charlotte, her daughter, then turned her gaze squarely on Camilla. "She's happy," she said evenly. "That's what matters today." Camilla didn't miss the edge in Kate's tone, but she responded as if it hadn't been there at all. "Of course," she replied, dabbing her temple lightly with a handkerchief. Though comfort can be deceiving, especially in public life. Prince William, who had been standing a few feet away in quiet conversation with a cousin, caught the shift. He turned toward the group, his expression cooling. His back straightened. His eyes, which are usually warm, narrowed, just slightly. Queen Camilla lowered herself into a nearby garden chair with practiced elegance. One gloved hand smoothed the crease of her trousers, the other settled gracefully in her lap. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes remained fixed on Princess Charlotte. That stare lingered a moment too long. Charlotte felt it. She didn't know how to name it, but it tugged at her spine like a thread. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, then, almost unconsciously, sat up straighter. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. Camilla's voice came again, low, almost fond. "Back straight, darling," she said. "You have such a delicate frame. You'll want to protect it as you grow." For a heartbeat, no one said anything. The picnic sounds around them, the rustling grass, faint laughter, and the clink of teacups seemed to hush. It might have passed as harmless and maternal even, except for what came next. "Straighten your back," Camilla repeated, her eyes sharper now. "It's a queen's spine you're carrying." And just like that, the atmosphere changed. Kate's teacup froze midair, the liquid inside trembling slightly. She lowered it with exaggerated care, as though the smallest misstep might break the tension. Her smile, still technically on her face, was now a practiced thing, tight and effortful. William didn't move much, but his shift was unmistakable. He stood straighter. Charlotte, for her part, blinked. Her small shoulders straightened instinctively. Was she sitting wrong? Had she done something wrong? The moment felt like stepping out of sunlight into sudden shade. She looked down at her hands, then up at her mother, then at Camilla, searching for a signal, for something to help her understand what she had missed. Queen Camilla continued, her voice just as quiet, but more pointed now. "You've got her eyes, you know, Diana's. But you will need more than eyes to survive in this family." There it was. The name landed softly, but it rang through the field like a bell. Charlotte tilted her head, puzzled. She knew the name, of course. Grandma Diana, the one in the framed photo in the drawing room. The one Mummy sometimes talked about with that faraway look. But what did her eyes have to do with anything? To the adults, however, the meaning was clear. Charlotte, feeling suddenly very small despite her best posture, looked down again. That cozy, joyful bubble she had been in moments ago, running in the grass, laughing with cousins, had popped. She felt exposed. She didn't quite understand what Camilla meant, but she knew enough to feel that it wasn't fair. Charlotte sat very still, the words swirling in her mind like a puzzle she couldn't solve. "More than eyes," she whispered to herself, the phrase echoing faintly in her thoughts. What did it mean? Camilla's expression was calm, unreadable. It was as if she had simply passed along some age-old truth, neither cruel nor kind, just fact. The kind of truth that the family expected every generation to carry, whether they were ready or not. Kate reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Charlotte's face, her fingers gentle but firm. "You did nothing wrong, love," she whispered, drawing her daughter into a soft embrace. Her voice was calm, but her hand, resting lightly on Charlotte's back, trembled almost imperceptibly. Charlotte blinked up at her mother, but she said, her voice wavered, about Grandma Diana, and my back, and surviving. The words stumbled out in a whisper, as though saying them too loudly might make them hurt more. Kate pulled back slightly, just enough to look into Charlotte's eyes. "None of that means anything about you," she said firmly. "Your strength isn't in how you sit, or how you look. It's in here." She touched her fingers to Charlotte's chest. "It's in your heart." Charlotte's lip quivered. "But she made it sound like I'm not enough, like I need to change something to be like her." Kate's expression darkened for a heartbeat. She swallowed hard, her gaze flicking toward Camilla, who sat a few feet away, cool and composed with a teacup in hand, pretending not to listen, but very much watching. A quiet tension sat between them, the kind that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. "You are more than enough," Kate said softly, but with a steel edge creeping into her tone. "Don't ever let anyone, not even someone older or wearing a crown, tell you otherwise." Charlotte gave a small nod, but her shoulders still looked too heavy for a child her age. That's when Princess Anne noticed. From a few steps away, Anne had been sitting quietly beneath an oak, sipping from a delicate floral teacup and listening with the sharp ears of someone who'd navigated decades of palace drama without ever letting it touch her skin. But this was different. This wasn't gossip or politics. This was about one of theirs. Anne had noticed the subtle shift in the air. Without a word spoken aloud, Anne knew exactly what had happened. Camilla's words had landed like a sharp sting, and Charlotte was carrying the weight all on her own. Without hesitation, Anne rose from where she sat on the grass and moved calmly toward Charlotte. No drama, no grand gestures, just a steady presence that said, "I see you. You're not alone." Anne has always taken a special interest in the younger generation of the royal family. While their time together is often away from the spotlight, those close to the family say Anne sees glimpses of herself in Charlotte, a spirited young girl with confidence, curiosity, and a love for horses. As the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, Princess Anne understands the pressures that come with being a royal woman, and she's naturally protective of Princess Charlotte, offering quiet support, guidance, and the kind of wisdom that only decades of royal experience can provide. Their relationship is marked by respect, affection, and an unspoken understanding of the unique life Charlotte is growing into. When Anne reached the young princess, she knelt down beside her on the soft earth, lowering herself until her eyes were level with Charlotte's. In that simple movement, Anne stripped away the titles, the protocols, the weight of royal expectation, and became what Charlotte needed in that moment: someone safe. She reached out, her gloved hand gently enclosing Charlotte's much smaller hand. "You are not alone." Camilla's comment had not been a casual critique. It had pierced through layers of innocence and trust, shaking the fragile roots of a little girl's self-worth. Anne's chest tightened, but her voice, when it came, was so gentle it might have been mistaken for the breeze itself. "Tell me what happened, love," she said, brushing a lock of hair away from Charlotte's face. The girl hesitated, her lower lip trembling just slightly. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. Then, barely louder than the wind through the trees, she whispered, "She said my eyes look like Grandma Diana's and that I will need more than my eyes to survive in the palace." For a long second, Anne didn't speak. Princess Anne's gaze didn't harden, but it deepened, became steadier, anchoring and grounding. But inside, something flared. A quiet, fierce protectiveness. This wasn't a petty palace drama. This was a wound to Charlotte's identity and her lineage. A subtle blow to her connection to a woman loved by millions, and more importantly, loved by Anne herself.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know. So you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it.
Anne gave Charlotte's hand a gentle squeeze. "Oh, darling," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "Your eyes carry more than beauty. They carry the truth, grace, fire. You don't need to change for this place. This place will have to learn how to rise to you." Charlotte's breath hitched softly. "You don't need thicker skin to survive the palace," Anne continued. "You need to remember who you are, where you come from. That's your shield." Charlotte's brow furrowed. But why would she say it like that? About Grandma Diana? Anne paused, then looked out across the green, past the rose bushes and well-trimmed hedges, her voice dipping into something far older than the present moment. "Because your grandmother Diana still casts a long shadow," she said, finally. "Even now. Especially now." Charlotte tilted her head. "Did you like her?" Anne smiled faintly. "We were very different, your grandmother and I, but yes," Anne said, her voice steady. "I loved her." A silence passed, one that held the weight of things too large for a child to carry, but too important to ignore. "You see, Charlotte," Anne went on, "when your grandfather married Diana, the family tried to mold her, bend her, but she refused to break, and she paid the price."
You believe there was a conspiracy to kill Dodi?
They been murdered. Dodi and Diana been murdered, definitely. I am the father who knows everything.
For that courage. "And so did your father." Charlotte blinked, her eyes glistening. "Is that why people didn't like Grandma Camilla?" Anne exhaled softly. "Some people still don't. Not because of who she is today, but because of what she was part of. Charles, your grandfather. He loved Camilla long before he married Diana. And even after he married Diana, he didn't let Camilla go." Charlotte's mouth parted in quiet surprise. "But he was married." "Yes, he was. And it broke your grandmother's heart." Anne's voice was firm now, but not cruel. It broke many hearts. There was no bitterness in her tone, only memory and truth. "And the Queen?" Charlotte asked. "Did she like Grandma Diana?" Anne smiled again, this time with something soft and sad behind it. "Our mother, the late Queen, was not always open with her feelings. But I knew her well. And I'll tell you this, she respected Diana deeply. She saw her effect on the people. She admired her strength, even when it made things complicated." Charlotte sat quietly, absorbing each word like a sponge. Her little fingers remained in Anne's, gripping tightly. "And now," Anne whispered, "you carry that same fire, Charlotte. And some people who've worked their whole lives to fit into this place, may see that as a threat. But it isn't. It's a gift." Anne was still kneeling beside her, her hand still wrapped around the little girl's. For a moment, her usually composed face softened in a way that caught everyone's attention. A single tear slipped down her cheek, a rare, unguarded moment from the Iron Daughter. That tear wasn't just for Charlotte, it was for Diana. For the years Anne spent watching the institution strain under the weight of its own expectations. Watching women like Diana bend until they couldn't anymore. Anne wiped the tear without a word, returning her gaze to Charlotte with a steadiness that could calm oceans. "You don't have to earn your place in this family," Anne said. "You were born into it, and no one gets to make you feel less than whole." Camilla sitting calmly with her gaze unreadable. She had heard every word, but Anne didn't flinch. She didn't acknowledge her. Not yet. Then Princess Anne took a slow, steady breath and lifted her eyes, locking them on Camilla. Her voice, though quiet, carried a heavy weight. "No child in this family will ever be spoken to like that. Not while I'm still breathing." Camilla blinked, startled for a moment, Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. A flicker of feeling passed through her eyes. Hurt? Guilt? Anger? It was impossible to tell. Whatever it was, she smothered it quickly, replacing it with her usual guarded poise. "I didn't mean to," Queen Camilla began, being defensive. "But you did," Princess Anne cut in, not harshly but with an unwavering firmness. "You meant every word, and she heard it." She nodded subtly in the direction of Charlotte, who was pretending to examine her shoes, but whose flushed cheeks betrayed how closely she'd been listening. Camilla's jaw worked silently, as if weighing a dozen responses, but settling on none. Kate, nearby, let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her shoulders dropped slightly as the tension left her posture. She gave Anne a grateful look, eyes shining with unspoken appreciation. "Thank you," Kate said quietly, but then continued talking. "I didn't know if I should." "You shouldn't have had to," Anne cut in without looking away from Camilla. "That's not your battle to fight. Not alone." William stood a step behind Kate, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He nodded once, a silent show of solidarity. The muscles in his jaw flexed, holding back words that threatened to break free. "Charlotte is just a child," he finally said, voice low. "She doesn't need to be dragged into whatever this is." Camilla raised an eyebrow, not in challenge, but almost in resignation, as though the weight of years and titles pressed down harder than ever. Her voice, when it came, was softer than before, almost weary. "You all think the worst of me," she said, not looking directly at anyone now, but rather into the middle distance. "I was trying to help, to prepare her." Anne's jaw tightened. Her stance didn't shift, but the temperature in her tone dropped. "Help her how?" she asked. "By crushing her spirit before it has time to grow?" Camilla opened her mouth to reply, but Anne stepped slightly forward, her voice unwavering. "You forget Charlotte's not some distant figure to us. She's our blood, our future. She's a child." The words hung heavily in the air. No one dared to interrupt. Camilla's hand trembled slightly around the stem of her glass of Pimm's. "This family doesn't offer much room for softness, Anne. You know that. I thought if she learned early, she wouldn't be so." Her voice trailed off. Anne replied, "Is that what you're afraid of? That she'll grow up unprepared for the damage this place can do?" Camilla didn't respond. Anne shook her head slowly. For a long, suspended moment, silence ruled. Then, from behind them, a small voice broke through. "Aunt Anne?" Anne turned at once, her entire presence softening in a blink. "Yes, darling?" Charlotte sat on the edge of the blanket, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her face was flushed, but her expression was far more composed than any 9-year-old's should be. "You don't have to fight for me," she said, trying her best to be brave. "I'm okay." Anne's face gentled into a quiet, tender smile. She walked over and knelt in front of Charlotte, lowering herself to the child's eye level once more. "It's not about fighting, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of hair back behind Charlotte's ear with careful fingers. "It's about making sure you always know your worth, that you never let anyone dim that light inside you. Not even family." Charlotte nodded solemnly, and her small fingers reached out, finding Anne's and gripping them tightly like a lifeline. Behind them, Kate ran a hand through her hair, blinking back what she refused to let become tears. Her eyes were wet, and she tilted her head downward, pretending to check the food tray while swallowing a knot in her throat. Camilla watched it all unfold. Her face remained unreadable, a practiced calm carved by decades of public life. But deep in her eyes, something shifted. Not defeat, not remorse, but something quieter. Maybe reflection. Anne rose again, slowly, with grace born not from title but from conviction. She kept hold of Charlotte's hand as she turned back to face Camilla one final time. "We all have our roles to play, Camilla," she said, voice firm but free of venom. "But mine will never be to stay silent when a child is made to feel small, especially not in this family." Camilla lowered her gaze. For once, she had no retort, no carefully chosen line to end the moment on her terms. Just silence. And in that silence, something old broke and something new began. So what do you think? Did Princess Anne do the right thing by speaking up for Princess Charlotte against Queen Camilla when no one would? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, follow, share, and subscribe for more. Click on the next video on your screen. You will enjoy it.